On a black beach on the island of Tanna, where volcanic ash meets the sea, and the air always smells faintly of sulfur, men gather every evening at the exact same hour their ancestors did, generation after generation for over 3,000 years. No calendar tells them when to come, no priest calls them. The sun simply falls toward the horizon, and something ancient in them answers. They sit in a circle on the bare earth of a place called the Nakamol, a word that means far more than meeting house. It means memory, it means law, it means the invisible thread that keeps a society from tearing itself apart. And in the center of that circle sits a wooden bowl filled with a muddy, grayish liquid that most of the outside world has never heard of, and that almost destroyed an entire branch of medical science simply by being misunderstood. This is Kava. And before you decide it is just another obscure island drink, you should know something unsettling. For centuries, European explorers who watched natives drink it assumed they were witnessing a ceremony of madness. They were wrong. What they were actually watching was one of the oldest, most sophisticated social technologies ever developed by a human civilization, a substance so central to Pacific identity that entire wars were fought over who had the right to serve it, and entire kingdoms rose and fell on the strength of a single root. To understand how something so small could hold such enormous power, we have to travel back roughly 3,000 years, long before Rome existed, long before the pyramids of Giza had finished settling into the desert sand, to a scattering of people known to archaeologists as the Lapita. They were not soldiers or kings. They were something far rarer in the ancient world, navigators of almost impossible skill, who launched themselves onto open ocean in double-hulled canoes with no compass, no maps, and no guarantee that land existed beyond the horizon at all. They read the stars. They read the swells of the water like a language. They watched the flight patterns of birds the way modern pilots watch radar. And somewhere in that terrifying, magnificent migration across thousands of miles of open Pacific, they carried with them a plant, not for food, not for shelter, for something far more fragile and far more essential to survival than either, a way to keep peace among themselves when the isolation of island life threatened to tear their small communities apart. The plant was Piper Methysticum, a member of the pepper family, whose Latin name literally translates to the intoxicating pepper. But the Lapita and their descendants did not need Latin to understand what they had. They understood its power through experience, through trial, through the kind of intimate botanical knowledge that took generations to build, and that we, with all our modern laboratories, are only now beginning to properly measure. The root of this shrub, when pounded, chewed, or grated and mixed with water, released a substance that did something almost no other plant on Earth does quite the same way. It did not intoxicate the mind into confusion the way alcohol does. It did not create hallucination. Instead, it loosened the muscles, calmed the nervous system, sharpened mental clarity, and slowly, deliberately, lowered the emotional walls between one human being and another. In a world where a single argument in a small island community could mean generations of blood feud, this was not a party drug, this was a survival tool. And this is where the story takes its first genuinely surprising turn, the kind of fact that rarely makes it into casual conversation about the Pacific Islands. Kava was not simply consumed, it was governed. Across Fiji, Tonga, Samoa, Vanuatu, and Hawaii, elaborate rules developed around exactly who could drink kava, in what order, using which cup, and in what ceremonial sequence, because the drink itself became a physical map of social rank and political power. In Tonga, the kava ceremony was so precisely choreographed that a single mistake in the order of serving could be read as a political insult severe enough to shift alliances between chiefs. Imagine a modern boardroom where the order in which coffee is poured determines who holds real power in the company. That was kava in ancient Tonga. The person given the first cup was not merely honored. They were being publicly, ceremonially confirmed as the most powerful individual in the room, in front of witnesses whose memory would carry that confirmation for the rest of their lives. In Fiji, chiefs used the kava ceremony, known there as savusavu, as a formal ritual of diplomacy between villages, a way to request permission, resolve disputes, or seal alliances without a single weapon being drawn. In a region of the world where warfare between island clans could be constant and brutal, Kava became something extraordinary, a chemical technology for de-escalation, centuries before psychologists ever coined the term. But the story does not stay peaceful for long, because nothing this powerful stays confined to ceremony and calm. As Pacific societies grew more complex, so did their relationship with this plant, and Kava began to reveal a darker, more fascinating layer of its history, one bound up with religion, with the supernatural, and with a fear of the unknown that still echoes today. In several island cultures, Kava was not viewed as merely a social lubricant, but as a literal bridge to the world of ancestors and gods. Priests in parts of Fiji and Vanuatu used Kava in trance ceremonies, believing that the drink thinned the barrier between the living and the dead, allowing spiritual communication that ordinary consciousness could never achieve. Entire origin myths grew up around the plant. One widespread legend tells of a woman, sometimes described as diseased or dying, whose body was buried, and from her grave grew the very first Kava plant, a gift born from death itself and offered back to the living. Another legend, found across multiple islands with slight variations, tells of rats that were seen chewing on a wild root and behaving strangely calm afterward, leading the first humans to test it themselves. Whether these stories reflect literal events or symbolic memory passed down through oral tradition, historians cannot say for certain, and that uncertainty is itself part of what makes this story so hauntingly beautiful. Unlike written civilizations that left behind stone tablets and scrolls, Pacific island cultures preserved their history through voice, through chant, through ceremony repeated so many thousands of times that the ritual itself became the record. Kava was not just remembered. Kava was the memory. For nearly 3,000 years, this entire world remained almost completely unknown beyond the Pacific. Then, in the 18th century, ships began arriving that had never been seen before, carrying men with pale skin, strange clothing, and instruments capable of measuring the very stars the islanders had used for navigation for millennia. When Captain James Cook's expeditions reached islands like Tonga and Hawaii in the 1770s, European sailors were formally invited into Kava ceremonies, and their written accounts, preserved today in ship logs and journals, give us our first outside glimpse into a tradition that had already existed for longer than most European nations had been unified kingdoms. But what those sailors witnessed disturbed them in ways their journals struggled to fully articulate. They saw islanders, often young men or women of high status, chewing the raw kava root and spitting the masticated pulp into a communal bowl to be mixed with water, a preparation method chosen because human saliva contains enzymes that help break down the plant's compounds more effectively than any tool available at the time. To European eyes trained in the rigid table manners of the 18th century, this appeared shocking, even repulsive. What they failed to understand, blinded by their own cultural assumptions, was that they were witnessing an extraordinarily sophisticated, community-tested method of extraction developed over dozens of generations, refined the way a chemist refines a formula, except this formula had been perfected through lived experience rather than laboratory equipment. This collision between two worlds, one ancient and oral, the other newly literate and imperial, set off a chain of events that would nearly erase Kava from history entirely. As European missionaries began arriving in the Pacific throughout the 19th century, determined to convert island populations to Christianity, they identified Kava ceremonies as one of their primary targets for elimination. To missionaries raised in Victorian morality, the sight of a substance so deeply tied to indigenous spiritual practice, chiefly authority, and non-Christian ritual represented exactly the kind of pagan tradition they had crossed oceans to destroy. In parts of Hawaii, Fiji, and Tonga, missionaries actively campaigned against kava drinking, associating it with idleness, spiritual corruption, and resistance to colonial control. Entire kava traditions that had survived since before the birth of Christ came under direct threat from men who believed, sincerely and dangerously, that they were saving souls by uprooting a plant that had held island societies together for millennia. And yet, and this is one of the most quietly remarkable facts in this entire story, Kava survived. It survived not through open rebellion, but through something far more resilient: cultural stubbornness. In villages across Vanuatu and Fiji, communities simply continued the practice out of sight, folding it back into daily life once missionary attention moved elsewhere. preserving it in the very structure of their social hierarchy that colonial administrators could suppress but never fully understand well enough to dismantle. In some islands, Kava ceremonies became quietly nationalistic acts, a way of declaring, without ever raising a weapon, that a people's identity could not be erased by a foreign religion or a foreign flag. By the time island nations began winning independence throughout the 20th century, Kava had transformed from an endangered ritual into a living symbol of cultural survival. When Fiji gained independence from Britain in 1970, Kava ceremonies were formally woven into state functions, presented to visiting foreign dignitaries as a mark of national identity and sovereignty. The same plant that missionaries once tried to eliminate was now being poured for presidents, prime ministers, and queens. But the story of Kava was about to take a turn that not even its oldest practitioners could have predicted. A turn that moved this humble island root out of remote village ceremonies and into modern pharmacies, laboratories, and eventually international controversy. Beginning in the late 20th century, Western scientific researchers became increasingly interested in the pharmacological properties of kava, isolating a group of active compounds called kavalactones, found primarily in the root of the plant. Early clinical studies, particularly throughout the 1990s in Germany, suggested that these kavalactones interacted with the brain's neurotransmitter systems in ways that appeared to reduce anxiety without some of the sedative, addictive properties associated with pharmaceutical anti-anxiety medications of the time. For a brief electric period, kava extract became one of the most popular natural anxiety supplements sold across Europe and North America, appearing in health food stores from Berlin to Vancouver, marketed as an ancient island secret finally unlocked by modern chemistry. And then, just as quickly, everything collapsed. In the early 2000s, a small number of reported cases of severe liver damage among kava supplement users in Germany and Switzerland triggered alarm across international regulatory bodies. Germany banned kava products outright in 2002. Other countries, including the United Kingdom and Canada, issued warnings or restrictions soon after. Overnight, an industry worth tens of millions of dollars nearly vanished, and a plant that had safely sustained entire civilizations for 3,000 years was suddenly being treated in Western headlines as a dangerous liver-destroying substance. It seemed, for a moment, as though the modern world had finally, definitively condemned kava to obscurity. But here the story reveals one of its most important and most overlooked twists, the kind of detail that separates careless journalism from genuine historical investigation. When researchers went back to examine exactly how those Western supplement extracts were being manufactured, they discovered something the original headlines had almost entirely missed. Traditional Pacific preparation of kava uses only the root and rootstock of specific noble cultivars of the plant, prepared with water, exactly as it had been for millennia. Many of the commercial Western extracts blamed for liver toxicity, however, had been manufactured using different extraction methods, sometimes using the plant's leaves and stems rather than the root alone, and sometimes using ethanol or acetone-based solvents rather than water, along with non-noble, higher-risk cultivars of the plant that traditional Pacific societies themselves had long known to avoid or use only under strict controlled circumstances. In other words, modern industrial shortcuts had potentially altered the chemical safety profile of a substance that indigenous knowledge, refined over 3,000 years of careful cultivation and preparation, had already learned how to use responsibly. The ban, in hindsight, may have punished the plant for the mistakes of an industry that had not bothered to consult the very civilizations who understood it best. By the late 2010s, several of the earlier bans, including Germany's, were formally reconsidered or lifted, as regulators acknowledged that traditional water-based root preparation carried a dramatically different and considerably safer risk profile than the industrial extracts responsible for the original health scare. Today, ongoing scientific research continues to investigate kava's genuine potential, and what is emerging paints a picture far more nuanced than either the wild enthusiasm of the 1990s or the panic of the early 2000s. Clinical studies, including controlled trials, have shown measurable anxiety-reducing effects associated with kavalactone compounds, particularly in cases of generalized anxiety, and researchers continue to explore its neurological mechanisms, which appear to involve modulation of GBA receptor activity in the brain. the same general neurological pathway targeted by many prescription anti-anxiety medications, though through a different chemical mechanism. At the same time, reputable modern researchers are careful to stress what remains unproven or uncertain. Long-term safety data is still limited, interactions with alcohol and certain medications remain a genuine concern, and the specific risks tied to particular cultivars and preparation methods are still being mapped out with scientific precision. This is not a plant that offers easy answers, and any honest history must resist the temptation to declare it either a miracle cure or a dangerous myth. It is instead something more interesting than either extreme, a genuinely powerful natural compound that ancient societies learned to use wisely long before modern chemistry existed to explain why it worked at all. What makes this story so quietly extraordinary, though, is not simply the chemistry, and not simply the controversy. It is what Kava reveals about the value systems of ancient civilizations that history books have too often ignored or oversimplified. Long before the concept of diplomatic protocol existed in European courts, Pacific Island societies had already built an entire system of ceremony hierarchy and conflict resolution around a shared bowl of root and water. Long before modern psychology understood the neurological value of shared ritual in reducing social tension, island communities were using Kava ceremonies to physically and chemically lower the aggression, anxiety, and social friction that might otherwise have torn small, isolated populations apart. And long before Western pharmaceutical companies began racing to patent synthetic anti-anxiety compounds, indigenous Pacific cultivators had already selectively bred and refined different varieties of Kava plants for exactly the effects they wanted, essentially conducting careful, patient, multi-generational pharmacological research using nothing but observation, memory, and oral tradition passed from elder to child across 3,000 years. There is something deeply humbling in that fact, if you allow yourself to sit with it. We often imagine ancient peoples as primitive, as waiting to be enlightened by later, more advanced civilizations, but the people who first discovered, cultivated, and ceremonially structured the use of Kava were conducting a kind of applied neuroscience millennia before the word neuroscience existed, using nothing but patience, observation, and respect for the plant they had been given by their environment. They understood something that modern industrial extraction methods briefly forgot, and modern regulators had to relearn the hard way, that how you prepare a powerful substance matters just as much as the substance itself, and that ancient knowledge, dismissed too quickly as superstition, sometimes contains precision that took Western science over a century to catch up to. And so today, on that same black volcanic beach on Tanna, and on hundreds of other islands scattered across the vast blue distances of the Pacific, the Nakamal still fills with men at exactly the same hour it always has. The wooden bowl is still passed from hand to hand. The mud-colored liquid still numbs the tongue in that unmistakable way that first-time visitors always remark on, moments before the quiet, grounded calm settles into the body. No missionary managed to erase it. No colonial administration managed to outlaw it into extinction. No modern health scare, however loud, managed to convince the people who understand this plant best to abandon 3,000 years of accumulated wisdom. It survived because the people who kept it alive understood something that outsiders, again and again, took generations to learn, that some traditions are not simply habits passed down out of laziness or superstition, but hard-won knowledge, encoded in ceremony because no one had yet invented a better way to preserve it. The next time you hear the word primitive used to describe an ancient culture, remember the islanders who mapped an ocean with the stars, who built peace with a bowl of root and water, and who understood the chemistry of calm long before anyone thought to write it down. Perhaps the real hidden history here is not about a plant at all. Perhaps it is about how easily we mistake unfamiliar wisdom for ignorance, simply because it never needed our permission to be true.